Next on the news, the report is in. The Archdiocese of New York receiving a passing grade from an independent review on how it handles sexual abuse cases. Net TV is airing the University of Notre Dame's forum on the abuse crisis facing the church. Currents News has a preview, plus we're talking with two of the panelists.
A Catholic high school in Queens honors one of its graduates, an NYPD detective who died of 9/11 related illnesses and fought for the 9/11 compensation fund. I'm Tim Hartman, and I'll have the story.
Also tonight, abortion activists trying to burn down Mexico City's famous cathedral. It's a busy night of news, and it starts right now.
The real focus here was on the safety of children in the Archdiocese today.
Former federal judge Barbara Jones facing the cameras today, disclosing the results of her independent investigation of clerical sex abuse in New York. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. In the report, the Archdiocese is fully compliant with the U.S. Bishop's zero tolerance policy. And while Cardinal Dolan says the findings are a relief, there are some recommendations in the document. Currents News' Emily Druby has the details.
Judge Barbara Jones, an independent investigator, is giving the Archdiocese a passing grade for tackling the clergy's sex abuse crisis and taking action to keep young people safe from harm.
No archdiocesan priest or deacon with a substantiated allegation of abuse of a minor remains in ministry today in this archdiocese. The Archdiocese is following the mandates of the Dallas Charter, and in some instances have gone beyond its requirements.
The charter was established by the U.S. Bishops' Conference in 2002 and has strong guidelines for healing, accountability, and the prevention of future acts of abuse. Still, with the abuse crisis capturing headlines around the world, Cardinal Timothy Dolan wanted an independent investigation to assure Catholics that the Archdiocese was following its own protocol.
People doubted the effectiveness, and they doubted those very assurances. And they wondered if the church was keeping its word. So, what to do?
The Cardinal selected Judge Jones more than a year ago.
There is certainly a commitment in the Archdiocese, throughout this Archdiocese, and its leadership, to maintain a safe environment for children.
She also determined the Archdiocese follows strict protocols every time they receive an allegation of abuse.
I feel very relieved and very grateful. I'm trying my best to serve my people. I love them, and my main job is to serve them as their pastor.
Judge Jones is also recommending new actions be taken, including modernizing technology, including an electronic case management system to help track abuse complaints, hiring one person whose responsibility is to oversee and monitor sexual abuse allegations, and expanding mandatory safe environment training required for archdiocesan employees working with children. The judge says the Archdiocese should continue its independent reconciliation and compensation program and accept new claims from abuse survivors. Through the IRCP, abuse cases are settled out of court.
Is a highly effective program. It has provided expedited relief to victim survivors.
The Archdiocese says to date they've paid out over $67 million to 338 victim survivors. If you'd like to read the full document, just go to thetablet.org. It's posted there. Tamara?
Thank you, Emily. More now on the Dallas Charter for the Protection of Minors that the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops established in 2002. Some of the measures include creating the Office of Victims Assistance to help individuals who come forward with allegations of abuse. The office provides counseling, referrals for therapy, and other important resources. Every employee of the Brooklyn Diocese, including students, undergoes mandatory training designed to spot the signs of abuse and how to stop it. In the Brooklyn Diocese, Bishop DiMarzio meets with survivors and listens to them carefully. One result of those talks is the annual Hope and Healing Mass. To contact the Diocese toll-free and confidential sexual abuse reporting line, dial 888-634-4499. The NYPD is mourning the loss of an officer who was killed by friendly fire in the Bronx. Dozens of members of the NYPD lined up outside Jacobi Medical Center to give a final salute to 33-year-old Brian Mulkeen as his body was escorted from the hospital. Mulkeen was one of several officers struggling with a suspect Sunday morning when fellow officers opened fire. Mulkeen was hit with 3 bullets. The suspect, who had various prior arrests, also died on the scene. Friends are saying he was a natural-born leader and a former standout athlete at Fordham University, where he graduated in 2008. Mulkeen's funeral will be held Friday at the Church of the Sacred Heart in Monroe, New York. American Jesuit priest Father James Martin had a private meeting with Pope Francis at the Vatican today. Father Martin tweeted, "Dear friends, today Pope Francis received me for a private 30-minute audience in the Apostolic Palace, where I shared with him the joys and hopes and the griefs and anxieties of LGBT Catholics and LGBT people worldwide. I was so grateful to meet with this wonderful pastor." Father Martin has been criticized by some conservative Catholics for reaching out to the LGBT community. The Vatican listed the private audience on the Pope's public schedule. There's a new monument in the center of St. Peter's Square, one dedicated to those who may never even get a chance to see it. It's called Angel Unawares. The statue shows a group of migrants and refugees on a boat with a pair of angel wings. The Pope says he wants the art to highlight the importance of welcoming the stranger. The new statue was unveiled on the World Day of the Migrants and Refugees. Francis celebrated Mass in St. Peter's Square for more than 40,000 pilgrims.
Non possiamo rimanere insensibili, con il cuore anestetizzato di fronte alla miseria di tanti innocenti. Non possiamo non piangere. Non possiamo non reagire.
Aspects of the liturgy itself also celebrated migrants. The choir members hailed from places all over the globe, and incense used during the Mass came from a refugee camp in Ethiopia. Mexico City police are hunting for a gang of abortion activists who tried to burn down the famous Metropolitan Cathedral. The arson was touched off by protesters demanding the country legalize abortion. Catholics rushed to the front doors of the church to protect the structure. Firefighters acted quickly to prevent the flames from spreading. Squads of police arrived to defend the church and the Catholics who formed that barrier outside the cathedral's entrance. In the Brooklyn Diocese, a Queens Catholic high school dedicated its first Mass of the new school year to a late detective. Luis Alvarez was a 9/11 hero who got sick with rare cancers after working at Ground Zero. He was a graduate of Monsignor McClancy Memorial High School. Currents News' Tim Harfman was at the school in East Elmhurst as the student body remembered him.
Monsignor McClancy High School in East Elmhurst, Queens, paying tribute to one of their own. NYPD Detective Luis Alvarez graduated from the Catholic school in 1983. He died on June 29th from cancer linked to September 11th, 2001. Alvarez spent his final weeks fighting for the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund before Congress.
You all said you would never forget. Well, I'm here to make sure that you don't.
This morning, Phil Alvarez took part in a blessing of this American flag artwork bearing his brother's name, which will be on display at McClancy.
His last few days were based on the faith that was structured here at McClancy and in the Catholic Church.
A former U.S. Marine, the 53-year-old served at Ground Zero. It was on the pile where NYPD chaplain Monsignor David Casado says Detective Alvarez lived out his faith.
He showed his faith by going there every day and trying to give some peace and comfort to other families.
Showing the spirit of McClancy taught by the religious brothers of the Sacred Heart.
We try to instill the values of service, generosity, leadership, and compassion. And certainly Luis exhibited those throughout his whole life, which he learned here from McClancy.
But his service came at a price, which is becoming all too familiar. 2,000 deaths have been attributed to 9/11 related illnesses, and 10,000 first responders and victims have been diagnosed with cancer. Matthew McCauley sat behind Alvarez during his powerful testimony to Congress.
There was no brighter example of service to others beyond himself than Lou. I mean, he, up until his final days, put everybody else in front of him, made sure his family was taken care of, very, very in touch with his faith.
His Catholic faith carried Detective Alvarez through his final moments. Now his alma mater carries on his legacy. In East Elmhurst, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Some students visiting the Diocese of Immigrants learning from the Bishop of Brooklyn. Students from the University of Applied Sciences in Constance, Germany, spoke to Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio last Friday as part of their International Leadership Development Program. Over a dozen students traveled between New York and Philadelphia for 12 days, speaking to different leaders of organizations and communities. Bishop DiMarzio talked about his impression of the young men and women after their meeting.
It's an interesting experience to be questioned by them, to respond to them, and to be somewhat impressed by them, but also to impart some knowledge, some experience that I have as a leader in the church.
The bishop was the last person questioned by the college kids before heading back to school. Still ahead, the Notre Dame Forum on Clergy Sex Abuse is coming up right after Currents News. A panel is taking on the big question facing the church: where are we now? After the break, we'll have an in-depth preview of the event, plus exclusive interviews with two of the panelists and the moderator, Crux's John Allen. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. The sexual abuse crisis has been in the headlines over the past year, prompting the University of Notre Dame to launch a series of initiatives aimed at addressing the issue. Last week, the university hosted a panel discussion that included leading voices on the crisis. National correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, was there and filed this report.
Just days ago, on the grounds of the famed University of Notre Dame, a panel was convened to tackle the difficult question of where the church stands today with regard to the sexual abuse crisis.
Please welcome John Allen.
Moderating the discussion, John Allen, editor of Crux, who spoke about the current state of affairs and how to best direct the conversation away from the outrage and toward healing and recovery.
What we have tonight is the church coming together. We have lay people and clergy. We have a victim of clerical sexual abuse. We have one of the bishops who was charged with engineering the recovery from that abuse. This is, in a sense, a microcosm of the church coming together, trying to figure out where are we and where do we go from here.
Part of the distinguished panel of survivors and reformers is Kathleen McChesney, a former FBI executive who's been working with the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops since the crisis erupted in 2002.
The issue of sexual abuse isn't just clergy sexual abuse. It's abuse that occurs in all types of Catholic ministries. So it's really critically important that we keep our eye on that.
Notre Dame's president, Father John Jenkins, helped organize the event because he believes it's important for the university to be a part of the recovery efforts.
What I really hope from this discussion is the people we have who themselves are so knowledgeable from various aspects of this situation can reflect on reality, and so we can understand where we are now and what we need to do in the future to serve the church and to rebuild the church.
And their commitment goes beyond the academic, with the release of a first-of-its-kind survey of Catholic seminaries on the issue of sexual harassment, and $1 million in funding to promote research projects related to the crisis.
What a university can offer is a kind of careful look at the facts, the information, to use its capacity for research, for study, expertise in the disciplines to get at the various dimensions.
A defining moment under the Golden Dome as the healing process continues, with candid dialogue and heightened awareness. At Notre Dame, Christopher White, Currents News.
Stay tuned after Currents News tonight for special coverage of the event on Net TV. Part of tonight's discussion includes Baltimore Archbishop William Lori. He was brought in by the Vatican to investigate former Bishop Michael Bransfield of Wheeling, West Virginia, who is accused of financial corruption and sexual misconduct with adults. Archbishop Lori spoke about why forums like this are so important.
Addressing of child sexual abuse and the abuse of vulnerable adults is one of the truly major issues facing the church. It's hard to see how we can proclaim the gospel credibly and fulfill the mission of the church unless we listen to and believe victim survivors, unless we attempt to bring healing to them and with them, unless we continue to strive to protect children and create this atmosphere, this environment, this culture in the church that is distinctly inhospitable to sexual abuse and the harassment of adults. It's fundamental to the life of the church. It's a priority like unto evangelization, education, and vocations.
Viewers will also hear from Juan Carlos Cruz, a survivor of one of the church's most notorious abusers in his native country of Chile. He sat down with Christopher White to talk about the courage it takes to continue his advocacy work with Pope Francis and how they are trying to turn the page on the abuse crisis in Chile.
Well, Carlos, it's obviously very difficult every time you have to share your story and talk about this issue. What gives you the courage to keep fighting?
You know what gives me the courage is thousands of survivors that cannot speak. I consider myself very fortunate to have these platforms where I can speak about what survivors are. I don't pretend to be the ambassador for every single survivor, because there's a lot of many courageous men and women out there that do a lot of things. But if I can help others who are unable to speak, who are walking right now amongst us, and it's difficult for them to speak. First of all, for me, it's important that those people know that they can talk to someone, that they can get rid of this misery that is inside by speaking, that someone is going to lend a hand. And the other thing is that we have to hold bishops and the church accountable on all this. So that's what gives me the courage or the strength, or whatever you want to call it. I just feel it's my duty.
In 2018, after Cruz's meeting at the Vatican, Pope Francis appointed Archbishop Charles Scicluna, one of the Vatican's leading and most trusted investigators in the fight against clerical sex abuse, to lead the investigation into the Chilean abuse crisis. Archbishop Scicluna will continue the series of conversations from Notre Dame on November 13th. Still to come on Currents News, the man leading the discussion at the University of Notre Dame, Crux's editor-in-chief, John Allen, joins us in studio. He gives us a look into the forum you won't want to miss. And please check out the latest features in the tablet, the Archdiocese family page. That's where you can send in photos of your family receiving certain sacraments, such as baptism, First Communion, confirmation, and marriage. For more information and to submit your pictures, go to thetablet.org/Archdiocesan family. We'll be right back. The panel discussion will be televised on Net TV right after this edition of Currents News. The moderator, editor-in-chief of Crux, John Allen, joins us now. John, thanks so much for being with us.
Of course, Tina, we're glad to do it.
John, so some of the top U.S. Catholic figures in the church were there. What can the audience expect to see on tonight's show?
Well, your audience can expect what they always get on Net, which is must-see TV. This forum was really remarkable because if you think about who we had on that stage at the University of Notre Dame. Peter Steinfels, probably the Dean of Religion Reporters in America, who has been covering the clerical sexual abuse scandals before you and I ever knew there was such a thing. Juan Carlos Cruz, a survivor of the most notorious pedophile priest in Chile, the ex-priest now, Fernando Caradima, guy who kicked open the doors on the scandal in Chile and also turned the Pope around. on that issue and who has regular contact with the Pope. Kathleen McChesney, former third highest ranking official in the FBI, who ran the U.S. Bishop's Office of Child Protection. And Archbishop William Lori of Baltimore, who has been a bishop for almost a quarter century and been dealing with this issue almost all of that time. Any one of these people could have anchored a fascinating discussion about the clerical abuse crisis in the church. To get all four of them together and to watch them interact and to see the synergy that happened among the four of them, I mean, it was something special. They had obviously all thought very carefully about what they wanted to say, because here's the thing. On the American Catholic landscape, the University of Notre Dame is a special place. You know, it is sort of considered like the Athens of the American Catholic Church. It's where Catholicism in America does its thinking, and people know that. They take it seriously when they're there.
Well, let's talk about the subject matter of the night's forum. The university's forum was highlighting the reforms the church is making to recover from the abuse crisis. Did any of the panelists talk about how they rate the church's performance so far?
Well, we did go a scale of 1 to 10, or, you know, A to F. But I think there's a pretty strong consensus with some dissent. I would say 3 out of the 4 people there would have agreed that the church over the last, say, call it decade and a half, has made remarkable strides. And that some of the criticism of the church that we are seeing these days, for instance, last year's famous Pennsylvania grand jury report, which suggested that absolutely nothing had been done by the Catholic Church to address child sexual abuse, is false. That in fact, after the Dallas Charter in 2002, strong measures were put into place to which the overwhelming majority of bishops bought in. You know, now every diocese in the country virtually is doing background checks. They have reporting mechanisms and so forth and so on. And so there was a sense that great progress has been made. Now that doesn't mean that there is an unfinished business, but that nevertheless important strides forward have been taken. The dissenting note was from Juan Carlos Cruz, who is a victim of a very well-known pedophile priest in Chile. And basically, Juan Carlos's argument was, you guys are Americans. This may be true in America, but it's not true where I come from. And it's not true in many other parts of the world. That this abuse that we're talking about is not a thing of the past. The cover-up is not a thing of the past. So I think there is a sense that some of the things that have happened here need to go global.
Well, so what do you hope the viewers will come away with once they watch this?
What I hope they will come away with is a sense that there are people out there, influential, responsible people, who do get it, who understand the cancer that this crisis has been for the Catholic Church for the last 20 years, and is likely to be for the foreseeable future, who also get that much of the criticism the church sometimes receives from the secular world is exaggerated, unfair, and out of context, and that there is a need to stand up against that. And at the same time, there is also a need to acknowledge we have not finished the job, that there are important pieces of unfinished business. I mean, Archbishop Lori of Baltimore, interestingly, I think was stronger than anyone else on this panel about the need to achieve real accountability for bishops, and not just bishops who abuse, but bishops who cover up abuse by others. And I think everyone would say that that remains unfinished business in the Catholic Church. So I think what I'm hoping people will take away is a sense that we can be tremendously proud of what we've done, but at the same time we cannot be complacent because there's a lot left to be done.
Okay, a lot more ahead. Editor-in-Chief of Crux, John Allen, thanks so much for being with us.
Of course, Tamara, glad to do it.
Stay right here with Net TV. Notre Dame's panel discussion, The Church Crisis, Where Are We Now? With some of the world's most renowned experts on this very important issue is next. That is Currents News. I'm Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.